Resident Evil Code Veronica, originally developed for the Sega Dreamcast, was never ported to the PC. It was, however, ported to many other consoles, which means there are a lot of options to choose from to play it on PC using emulation. And in this video, I'm going to compare 5 different versions. So let's get started. Let's start by looking at the original Dreamcast version of Resident Evil Code Veronica emulated on the Flycast emulator. Flycast is an open source Dreamcast emulator that's available as both a RetroArch core and a standalone app. For this video, I used the standalone version. So how does Code Veronica run on it? Well, overall, it runs very well. The game is limited to 30 FPS, but I've seen no performance issues on my PC whatsoever, and no major glitches either. My CPU is an i5-9600K for reference. The only minor issue that I've seen is that the game displays at a wrong aspect ratio, which makes everything look a little bit wider than it should be. But you wouldn't notice this without the side-by-side comparison. There's also a widescreen hack, but it shows parts of the screen that are not rendered correctly, so I wouldn't recommend it. Oh, and another very important difference. Steve's hair in this version looks different from every other version. Here are the settings I used for this video. As you can see, this is a very good way to play this game on PC, but there are many other versions which could offer improvements. So let's move on to the next option. The next version we're going to take a look at is the PS2 version of Resident Evil Code Veronica X running on PCSX2. PCSX2 is the most advanced PS2 emulator, which is also available now as a RetroArch core as well as a standalone emulator. The standalone dev build is much more advanced than the RetroArch core though, which is why it's the version I'm using for this video. On PCSX2, Resident Evil Code Veronica X runs very well. Much like the Dreamcast version on Flycast, the game is still limited to 30 FPS and I've seen no performance issues on my PC and no major glitches. However, there is a small visual glitch. Some transparent textures are not blended correctly, as you can see here. Other than that, the PS2 version of Code Veronica has a few differences compared to other versions. For example, as you may have noticed already, the PS2 version is the only one to feature motion blur. It's a subtle effect, but definitely noticeable. Another difference is that the cutscenes are much brighter than in other versions. Also, this version displays at the same wrong aspect ratio as the Dreamcast version. And finally, the PS2 has the worst texture quality of all of the versions, as you can see here. Here are the settings I used for this video. So, while it runs fine and looks okay, due to the transparency issue and lower texture quality, I wouldn't recommend the PS2 version. But we have a lot of versions to look at, so let's take a look at another one. The next one is the Gamecube version of Resident Evil Code Veronica X running on Dolphin. Dolphin is the famous Gamecube and Wii emulator, a very advanced emulator that's also available as a RetroArch core. For this video, however, I'm using the standalone version. Resident Evil Code Veronica runs perfectly on Dolphin. The game is once again limited to 30 FPS, but there are no performance issues and no visual glitches. Every effect seems to be displayed correctly. The game is also displayed in the correct aspect ratio, unlike the PS2 and Dreamcast versions. There's also a widescreen hack available in the settings, although, like the one in Flycast, it shows parts of the screen that are not rendered correctly. Here are the settings I used for this video. So, while this version is great, there are still a couple of other versions to look at, and they might have improvements over this one, so let's check the next one.
That was too close. But I found something, thanks to you. Looks cool, huh?
The next one is the Xbox 360 version of Resident Evil Code Veronica X running on Xenia.
Found it, and I'm keeping it. Fine. Let's make a deal.
Xenia is the only Xbox 360 emulator available, and despite being considerably old, it's not as fully developed as other emulators featured on this video. As you might have noticed, the Xbox 360 and PS3 versions of Code Veronica have some differences compared to older versions. The most noticeable one is the brand new lighting system, which makes the game look quite different. It does have nice dynamic shadows, as you can see here, but I'm not convinced that it's better than the old lighting. In a lot of scenes, the new lighting looks flatter and worse to me.
You must be one of Umbrella's lower level officers if you're in command of a backwater base like this one.
What do you think about new lighting? Tell me in the comments below. Anyway, other than the lighting, most of the game looks the same, but there are a few downgrades, unfortunately. First, the water. On Xbox 360 and PS3, while the water does have a more advanced shader, it's missing the 3D waves that you'll find in the older versions. And as you might have noticed already, the textures have a very grungy look, with lots of color banding. And finally, this version is missing the fog effect, which makes a lot of scenes lose the atmosphere completely. Now let's go back to the emulation on Xenia. Code Veronica unfortunately doesn't run very well on Xenia. The game is still kept at 30 FPS, but I've seen a lot of performance drops, and more importantly, several glitches. Firstly, the audio has a slight delay, which is something that happens in every game on Xenia. Next issue is the dynamic shadows, which are completely broken on Xenia. Also, in some pre-rendered cutscenes, I've experienced some heavy visual glitches. And finally, the emulator crashed quite a few times when recording this footage. So yeah, this is not a good way to play the game yet, in my opinion. Finally, we have one last version to look at, and that is the PS3 version of Resident Evil Code Veronica X running on RPCS3. RPCS3 is the only PS3 emulator in active development, and it's improving very quickly, with more and more games becoming playable with little to no glitches. As I've said before, the PS3 version of Code Veronica has the same changes and limitations as the Xbox 360 version. So that means the same new lighting system, the same downgraded water, and everything else. The dynamic shadows work fine on RPCS3 though, unlike Xenia. Code Veronica on RPCS3 runs pretty well, still at 30 FPS however, but I've not seen any performance drops on my PC. I've seen however a few glitches though. Starting with the resolution. This footage was recorded with the emulator set to increase the resolution to 4K, but as you can clearly see, it's still rendering at 720p, the game's native resolution on PS3. For some reason, it seems that the resolution increasing feature is not working for this game unfortunately. Other than that, sometimes there's this flickering glitch on the characters. Also, the depth of field effect that's present on Xenia is missing on RPCS3. But these are minor issues, and since the resolution problem is dependent on your screen resolution, I believe this is still a valid way to play the game for some people. Anyway, here are the settings I've used for this video. So, after looking at all of these options, what's the best one? Well, in my opinion, the best way to play Code Veronica on PC is to use Dolphin to emulate the Gamecube version. It runs perfectly and renders every effect correctly. It's also the only version that displays in the proper aspect ratio. I don't see any reason to go for the other options, unless you really like the look of the HD version. In that case, your best bet is to use RPCS3. What do you think about it? Is Dolphin the best option? Let me know in the comments below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe for more. By the way, I want to thank everyone for subscribing and helping me reach 1,000 subscribers. I know I haven't posted videos for a while, but I have a lot of videos planned, so stay tuned. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.